So what we're looking at today in particular is modeling a few of these very important, relevant exterior pieces. And if we have time, we'll also go through this X bracing. All of those for right now, with where you're at on Revit, are going to be best modeled by using generic components. Okay, so that's going to be the technique that we're going to use. So let's start with the easy one, which is this little piece right here. Okay, so inside of Revit, you should be at something like this. Okay, that's about where we're at. And just to capture this in the recording, I mentioned it just a few minutes ago, going through, this is what I have in terms of the wall heights right now. So super important thing to note. I've got level 1 at 0, level 2 at 9, top of roof, and let's set this to wireframe so you can actually see the roof. I guess I don't have our roof modeled yet. Thought I did. We'll put a roof in here really quick because that's important. But top of roof should be right here. And then top of walls, top of the parapet walls, all the way up to 20. Okay, so yeah, no, I don't have a roof in. Bummer. Okay, let's add in the roof. So to do that, that wasn't part of the plan, but let's just do it really quick. I'm going to go to, I'm going to add my roof plan in first. Okay, so I already have that as a level, which you can see inside of my elevation view. So TO roof, or top of roof. So I'm going to go to view because we're adding a new view, a new plan view, and I'm going to select TO roof. Anything that you have as an elevation tag here, or an elevation target, whatever you want to call those kids, will show up in this list. But a lot of times I'm going to have things top of column, top of masonry. I'm going to have a lot of tags in there that I don't need floor plans for. That's why they're not automatically generated. Okay, so I'm going to just label that top of roof and say okay, and that's going to add that plan view in. I'm going to come in and do architecture, roof. I'm going to use my line tool. Actually, just use the box tool. I'm going to go inside edge to inside edge, and this is a flat roof. So I'm selecting everything and saying nothing slopes, right? I want to make sure that those tags are off. So if I look at that in 3D, you can see it has put that right on the correct elevation tag or elevation level. When I green checkbox that, it should build a roof going 1 foot up. So now when I look at that elevation that's in wireframe, you can see that is what I have right here. To do this really quick, that is a 9-foot gap. I am going to actually move that roof down by 1 foot. If you guys remember, floors project down, roofs project up. So I labeled this top of roof. And I want you to look at where my roof showed up. It built the roof bottom on the top of the roof mark. So the top of the roof is no longer the top of the roof, right? Is it making sense? So I'm just going to select that in my elevation view, or I could do this in a section view. Again, if my elevations are set up correctly, you're not going to see it because hidden line is on by default. But if I just change this to wireframe, I can just select that roof and just use my move tool. And I'm just going to move it down 1 foot. And then you'll notice it's going to show up right here. Base offset from level -1 foot. Okay, I could also have just done that here simply by typing that in, selecting the roof and typing that number in, -1. I'm a visual person, so yeah, I kind of like to move things around on my own rather than typing in the numbers. Okay, so now that actually has the top of my roof as the top of the roof. Guys with me? Cool? All right, so the next thing we're going to do is we need to make this little gouge out of the parapet roof to put in what is a scupper, right? That's where all the water is sort of pouring off of this roof. It would be great if we had sort of an elevation view of that to see a little bit more about where that is. where it lines up with the windows, but we really don't have, I mean, this is the most square on it. It looks like that edge is over that mullion, right? That's sort of my guess. And it looks like that kid is about half of those windows. Those windows were 3 feet 4 inches. So I'm going to make that scupper element about 18 inches wide. Cool. That is the eyeballing method of studying photographs on buildings. All right. If we had bricks or something, I suppose we could count them, maybe. But yeah, this is just sort of trying to work our way through what we think's there. So the first thing that I need to do is build that little notch out of the roof. Okay, so the easy way to do that is simply to select the roof, and we're going to go back to Edit Profile. Just looking at my 3D view, I can navigate to that sort of elevation-ish kind of view so I can keep everything in front of me. And I'm just going to add a line up that is from the edge of that mullion. I'm going to offset that over my best guess. And as you've been playing along with this game, you've noticed I've been wrong a lot. But that happens. You kind of look at things, identify where you've gone wrong, and rework. But I'm just essentially offsetting that 18 feet, and then I selected the top line of my roof as my next element, right? So all I need to do now is use my split to divide that top edge into 2 lines, and then trim to build that. Okay, it's all that I'm working towards, so that when I green checky box, I've got that little piece carved out. Now, all that said, there is a lot of additional stuff happening on the roof to make that work. Right, there's some 45-degree angle stuff. There's a lot of waterproofing. There's a lot how the roof slopes. There's a lot of stuff happening. That is more 3rd, 4th, 5th year level stuff. So we're not going to worry about that, right? But just know it's not as easy as simply putting a gouge in a wall and trusting that all the water eventually is going to go where it's supposed to. Okay, but for this class, that's how we're going to treat it. No worries. The next thing that I need to build is this piece that projects off. And, you know, again, my guess is that there's probably like a channel that runs through that entire roof, and everything's sloping towards the middle, and it's probably like this long stainless steel interior gutter kind of thing. Again, we're just going to worry about the exterior for this class. So what I'm going to do for this case, we're going to go Component, Model in Place, and Generics. We know that that is existing on this wall, so I don't really need to worry about reference planes. Okay, so reference planes are super important. I'd love to show you guys how they work, but 9 times out of 10, you're going to have a reference plane existing to work off of. So in this case, we want to work off of this wall as our reference plane. So I'm going to go Set, pick a plane, and select that outside edge. And you don't need to turn on show, but I like to do it so that you can all see what I'm referencing. Okay, so I've got that plane is now, when I start my extrusion, that is the plane surface that I'm going to be drawing on. So this thing is a kind of a boxy shape with 2 edges, right? So water doesn't spill out of the side, it spills out from right here, which is both a terrifying detail and also really, really cool. I'm completely fascinated by it. Kind of like it, kind of want to know if it would work in Missouri. Okay, so we're going to go Extrusion. And I am going to draw that. We know it's not going up, right? Because then we'd be making a pond on the roof. We know it is going down. So I'm going to send that down about, let's do about a foot. And then over my 18 inches. And back up. That is sort of my starting point. It is happening entirely within that cutout, right? So I can go, let's look at that one more time there. So we can sort of assume that that is maybe 2 inches in, 2 inches in. And we know that those sides are going up higher than the bottom of this channel. Because again, if they weren't up higher than the bottom of the channel, all the water would just be slushing out of the sides. So let's send those sides up also about 4 inches. And we can start to put this stuff together. So again, I'm going to use my split tool and trim to start defining what that should look like. That's going to project away. Cool? So that's what you're working towards building. And you know, that doesn't look nearly that thick, right? This little piece right here. So I have that built in kind of a monstrous level of thickness. So let's pull that back down to, let's say, about 6 inches. Yeah, it's better, I think. Then also thinking this through. Who can tell me what other assumption I've made that's terribly wrong? So roof is filling up with water. It's a downpour. Water starts running in this direction. What does water happen if it hits this little spot right here? It's like one more thing for the water to have to go around, which means it's one more spot for the roof to leak, which means the roof's going to leak. So those really need to happen. Move here and here. And now I need to trim it all back together. Like that. Cool, so that's kind of what we're building. Easy peasy. We're starting off with the easy one. What's that? Huh? Hope so. Yeah, seems about right. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and right now my extrusion is going to go at 12 feet, which is ridiculous. So, you know, it's not doing that, right? Let's make a good guess. What are we thinking? They're 18 inches? 2 feet? Yeah, 2 feet, right? If these windows are 3'4" across this way, that's coming out pretty aggressively. So I'm going to select that and let's set that to a 2-foot extrusion. Finish model. And kind of take a look at it from a similar angle. Yeah, what do you think, everybody? 3 feet? Could be 3. Yeah, somewhere between 2 and 3. Cool, you guys with me? Making sense? All right, so finish model. Okay, so that one, pretty simple, all things considered. And you can see that that is a logical detail. Obviously, we would have roof membrane, all of that stuff to make all of that seamless. But again, we're just not going to get that far into it. But what we need to do next is we need that exterior piece that comes up right through here. And there's a couple of different ways that we could model that. But we're going to stick with something pretty easy. And let's to get there, I'm going to cruise through a couple of different modeling options that Revit has in terms of these generic families, okay? So a little bit of explanation to get us to that point. So I'm going to go back to Architecture, Components, Model in Place, and Generics. So we have covered an extrusion, right? So an extrusion is pretty simple. We draw a shape, the shape goes whichever direction away from, positive or negative, away from the reference plane we're working in. Okay, super simple in concept. The next one over, let's kind of buzz through all of these really, really quickly. A blend is also a simple extrusion, except it allows us to do two different shapes, connecting one shape to another shape. Okay, so if you're clicking along, build one of these really quick. I'm going to activate this. I'm going to make sure my reference plane is set to level 1. I don't want to be building off that wall anymore, so you might double check that. Just make sure your reference plane is set to 1. Right here, you will see a button that says Edit Top. If you can see Edit Top, then I know I'm editing the base for the bottom, right? If I activate Edit Top, then I know I'm editing the top and not the base. Okay, so we've got two pieces, and Revit is going to do its best job, not necessarily what's in your head, that's going to do the best job of putting those two pieces together. Okay, so let's just start with something simple, and you can go big square to edit top to big ellipse, right? Something like that. So those are the two forms that I have. So you'll want to note that these right now are really close together. So if I'm doing this for an architectural form, it's only going to be 1 foot tall. So not sort of the coolest thing here, but I can set that to, like, let's set that to 14. I'm going to green checky box, and I end up with that. And let me set this to shaded so you can actually see. It has built a really complicated little form right there for us. Okay, going from a square to an ellipse. Cool? And if it doesn't do exactly what you need it to, you'll notice there are some options in there about how to connect which vertice to which vertice. But wow, I've never really had to struggle with that. If it doesn't do it the right way, then I usually consider I'm modeling the wrong tool the wrong way. Okay? So let's delete that. Create. Let's do the next one. A revolve is a lot like working with a lathe. Okay, so a lathe is where you put a block of something, it spins really fast, and then you gouge into it with a chisel, right? That's kind of what a lathe is going to do for you. So there's a lot of architectural features that work that way, starting with columns, right? If I have a standard Doric column, this would be the fastest and easiest way to model something like that, because I can draw the profile of the column, and then it's going to build that as a system that rotates or sweeps around a central axis. Okay, so to do a lathe, again, I'm going to do this in floor plan view. It's kind of the easiest to see. So I'm going to start with a boundary line, and let's do a simple column, right? So I'm just going to come out 4 inches, down 2 inches, inset, make it a little bit wider at the base, and then sort of a fun little stippy thing like that. Okay, that's going to be really gnarly. It's kind of ugly. That's all right. I need to go ahead and close that off. Okay, just like everything in Revit, they do need to be closed loops. So might as well go ahead and make that hefty. Okay, next I have to select an axis line. So your axis line is what it's going to revolve around. So I usually just set that up in a way that I can see, really clearly how that's going to happen. Green checky box, and I end up with a column. Cool? So it rotates around it. Looks more like a chess piece than a column, for sure. Okay? But that's that. And again, edit revolve, I can always come back in and make any number of changes, and it's going to automatically update for me. Okay, so again, super easy to come back in, reselect, make modifications, edit, and delete. The next one, so that's revolve. The next one is a sweep. And this is what we're going to use for that stack on the side, is a sweep. So a sweep works by drawing a path and a shape. Okay, so activating sweep, I've got two options. For me, almost always, I am doing sketch path first, right? So I'm going to go sketch path. You have a line tool that you're working with where I can draw a path. I can even add some curvilinear stuff along said path. There we go. It's important that the path, you kind of can, but you really shouldn't. The path should not cross back into itself, right? Because if you think about trying to build a piece of geometry where it's intersecting itself, Revit's going to say, no, the real world can't do that, right? Sometimes it'll build it for you. Often it's not going to. That's a really often an error message that I see in terms of building these. This is my reference plane for the path, this little dashed green line right here. So whatever I put on this reference plane as a closed loop is going to project along that path. So easiest way to see that play out again is in a three-dimensional view. So if I were to come in right here, I'm going to green checkbox, and that's saying I'm accepting my path. That was step one. I'm going to come in and go edit profile so that I can draw on that reference plane associated with the path. And note that that reference plane is on the very first line that I draw. Okay? So simple circle, green checkbox, and there we go. It actually says it can't create that sweep because of where that's transitioning to the curves. So let's go to delete element, finish model. Oh, nope, didn't want to do it that far. Level 1. And let's redefine that really quick. Create path, sweep, sketch the path. Green checkbox to accept my path. Three-dimensional view. Edit the profile. Okay, so now it basically rebuilt but without the curvy part at the end. Green checkbox, circle shape projected along the path. Cool, so looking at that tool, you can begin to see how we can model this element.
Is there any way to get the tool to go in like all three directions, all three directions?
So the question is, can I get the sweep tool to go in all three directions? So in X, Y, and Z. And the answer is yes, but not through generic models. That's where we get into defining a three-dimensional curve with the custom mass tools. And we will get there, but not as part of this precedent. We'll do some advanced modeling technique stuff, but definitely not as part of this project. Okay. So let's go ahead and apply that technique. Oh, last Revit tool, but I'm not going to cover that right now, is swept blend. So that's the same thing as this sweep, except I have two reference planes, just like blend does. I can put one shape at the beginning, one shape at the end, and that will put those two things together for me. Okay, I have only found a handful of uses ever for it in terms of doing models, but when you do them and you need them, it's really nice to have them, right? So it's not one of those things I use very often, but it's pretty cool that it's there. Okay, so we need to define a line for that stack that comes down. So it's going to come out and up, just like that, right? And we'll use a sweep for it. Or do we want to use a generic model for it? Yeah, let's use a sweep. Seems like the right thing to do. Okay. So to do that, I think we're going to need to define a new reference plane, because if I use this wall as my reference plane, I really can't get that cylinder shape out and away from the wall, right? So I actually need a reference plane that's cutting through this direction. So let's do that. Let's go ahead and put this in. As a reference plane. And I'm going to go to my site view. I want to see everything from up above to put that reference plane in. And I'm just going to go reference plane, and I want to place it someplace right around here. And then we need to give a good sort of understanding of how far back that is from that edge. I'd somewhere around 10 feet. You know, if I took 3 windows right here, it's somewhere right around that mark. So I'm going to set that reference plane 10 feet off the outside edge of the wall. Again, with reference planes, we have to give them a name. So I'm just going to call it stack. It's a chimney stack, fire stack, something. Tubey thingy, right? Any number of names that you can give it. That allows me then, when I'm in my 3-dimensional view, to say I'm going to go create a sweep, and I'm going to go sketch path. Except this time when I'm going to set sketch path, I'm going to set my reference plane to stack. Okay, and say okay. And so, and when I turn that on, I can see exactly where that piece is. So I know right where I'm going to be drawing that element. So in my elevation view, let's look at how high that starts up. It starts about mid-height on the windows. So that's going to be someplace right around here where that is going to go out and up. And I'm going to set that path to start at the exterior edge of my wall, just like that. Okay, and if this is a struggle, I'm going to back up. I'm going to model this one other way. I think there's one other good way that we can model this. It's maybe a little bit easier. I think if I'm modeling this, this is definitely the technique that I use, but it isn't always necessarily the right way or the easiest way to describe something like that. So that's my path, right? Starting on the exterior wall, out and up. And you know, those stack things, they're about 8 inches in diameter. So I'm going to select a circle. Oh, actually, I need to go ahead and green checkbox. Right, my path is established. So green checkbox to establish the path. And now I need to edit my profile. So the profile is going to be a circle right here with about a 4-inch diameter. 0, 4. So that it's about an 8-inch tube. Green checkbox, and I have that. Who thinks that's too far away from the building? Yeah, you guys with me? It's way too far away. Okay, so select it, edit the sweep, edit the path, this view, and I'm just going to use my arrow key. I'm just going to nudge that. Wow, that's weird. It's going the wrong way. Let's bring that much, much closer. Trim, It's not close enough yet. Green checkbox, green checkbox, much better. Cool, so all that stuff you can edit, right? Because all we're doing is editing the path, and then it's rerunning the sweep. Cool, now, there are other things that happen up and down this vent. There's a cap on it. There's, the place that holds it at the roof. There's another brace that's right here. And then there's sort of this vertical piece that happens underneath. All those things matter. I'm not going to model them right now. But let's look at another quick technique to model this, okay? So the other thing that I could certainly do is I'm going to use my site view. So let's just go finish that one. I could come in and go architecture, component, model in place. Generic models, okay, and okay. I could do this as an extrusion that starts, I should be drawing by default on level 1. So just position that. I'm going to move it over. Move that edge to the wall. And let's move it about 2 inches away. Make it a little bit closer than that one even. Right? And I'm just going to green check box it and see what we've got in 3D. So that built a pipe starting at 0 and going up 12 feet because that's just happened to be what I had set in place. I know that this is actually starting up closer to about 6 feet. So I could change my extrusion start to 6, maybe 4. 4, there we go. 4, and then that one goes up to like right about there. Right, so I'm just sort of pulling those elements up and down. Now, that doesn't have the connection to the wall though, right? So that's one more piece that I need to build in this case, which brings us to another way to look at how things like this can happen. So the sloppy way to do something like this would be to say, okay, let's go create extrusion and set a reference plane to that wall, right? And now if I look at that wall, I could come in and do another cylinder just like that, right? And I know it's sketching that on that wall that I had my reference plane on. Green checkbox, and I could do that. Super sloppy, right? Not high quality enough. We would not be happy to see that. So we need to get into the last little bit of correcting some of this geometry. Okay, so if we look at our create tools, we have this other element right here called void forms. So what voids do, they subtract one object from another. Okay, so we're going to cover void forms and then turn you all loose to work and ask a few questions the rest of the day. So I can look at the geometry right here and know pretty simply by looking at this, that that is a 45-degree angle, right? If I've got two objects, 2 cylinders, same diameter, when they meet, they're going to meet at a 45-degree angle. So I could actually build something that sort of lops those 2 pieces off so I could connect them together a little bit more gracefully than what I'm showing on screen, right? And so void forms are something you're going to use often when you're building a little bit more complicated geometry. So let's do a little bit of void work off to the side first, just so you can see how this is going to come together. So if I do an extrusion and a box, okay, I've got that. if I come in and do create void form, I've got my same list of objects. Okay? I would say 9 times out of 10, maybe 99 times out of 100, I'm using a simple void extrusion on this. Okay? But I'm going to go void extrusion. I'm going to draw a second box. Whoa. Let's go create void extrusion. I need to change my reference plane because my reference plane was still set to that wall. So let's set my reference plane back to level 1. So that is going to subtract. This purple is going to subtract this solid. Right? So what this allows me to do, voids are a little tricky to select, by the way. That allows me to start building and carving out more complicated geometry. Cool? So I could use this tool to put a cleaner edge together, right? Which is not super easy to do, but also not bad. So also, again, as I mentioned, voids are a little bit tricky to find sometimes. Again, Revit likes you to select edges. So finding that is somewhat easy to do. This happens at times as well. If I have something that I want cut or not cut, I always have an option to come in here and say uncut. This is not cut by that. Every now and then Revit won't cut something. And when that happens, so you can see I've got my void form here, it is not cutting this. I can always activate cut. This cuts that, right? I can also say I don't want this to cut that. There's a whole sort of time when you're modeling things that sometimes as you're building up a fairly complicated object, you need to be able to manage those. So I'm going to delete both of those. And let's dive into voiding those two pieces off. Okay, so I'm going to model from this surface right here. So I'm going to go create void form, void extrusion. I'm going to set my reference plane as this back wall. And I'm going to draw a shape that goes from top right through here. Oh wow, it's going to be really hard to select. I guess it's going to go 8 inches. I was really hoping for an object snap right there, but it's not snapping. It's snapping the end. So what I'm lamenting about right now, y'all, is that's my 45, but I really need my 45 to be super precise. So I actually need to go back one step and tighten up my geometry a bit. See where this is extending too far out? Hoping that you can all kind of follow along with this really quickly, because I'm going to go back into this object. Edit extrusion. That needs to finish right there. And that number, if I look at my site plan and run a very accurate dimension, outside edge of circle to the wall is 10 inches. I need this actually set to 10 inches so that I can grab the end point of that cylinder, draw a line in 8 inches, and then down at 45. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my 3D view. You're kind of seeing why this was option 1, right? This is a fairly complicated thing to think about. I would almost say there's like if you're modeling this for a project and it's due the next day, you're totally doing this, right? But if you're modeling for a class and your model is being graded by me, yeah, I want to see it finished off better. I want to know that you know how to use the tools. So let's come in. Let's go to architecture, component, model in place, generic models, void form, void extrusion. I'm setting this back wall as my reference plane. And I'm zooming in on that area. Now I can come in and go top of that cylinder over 8 inches, down 45 degrees. And I'm essentially drawing a triangle. Although I'm realizing right now I'm doing this wrong still already. Tut tut, Dave. Finished model, it doesn't have anything to cut. When you do voids, oh man, they've got to be in the same family. I needed to take this guy, edit in place. So now I'm in the family for these tubes. And let's do that process one more time. Create, void form, void extrusion, set, pick a plane, that edge, line, top of the tube over 8 inches, down at a 45, back up vertically, trim. Green checky box. Okay, when you look at this, this doesn't want to be cut. This one does want to be cut, right? So I'm going to select this is cut by that. And why did it not do it? Oh man, sometimes doing stuff in this class is just brutal, you guys. This cuts that. There it goes. I did it the wrong order. The triangle cuts the cylinder. Okay, so for this next piece right here, I'm just going to extend that down a little bit. And I do the exact same thing in reverse, except for this piece. So I go to create, void, void extrusion. That view. Same line again. Here to here, but this time I need that triangle going in the other direction. And cut. This cuts the vertical, and it puts them together perfectly. It was way too much work to get there. I would use the sweep. But there's almost always 2 options to do that. Okay? Friday is a work day, so you need to be in. Mary will be here to answer questions for you. You need to finish off this scupper detail, this vertical detail, windows, and door. So that Monday we are ready to dive into rendering this in Twin Motion. Cool?